Welcome, everyone. This is our third and final installment of Armchair Traveler series for 2022. Thank you all for joining us. Our sponsor tonight for this event is Midcoast Hospital, so thank you to Midcoast Hospital. And without further ado, I'm going to hand everything over to Ethan. If you have any questions while we're going along, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will have a question and answer session at the end of the talk. All right, Ethan, take it away.
Okay, let's see if we can actually share the screen without making too big a fool of myself. There we go, and let's try this. All right, does everybody see a guy standing on the left staring up into a tree? Okay. Last year, in 2021, I did a big year. And for those of you that are new to birding or have never birded or have no idea what I'm talking about, a big year is an unofficial contest that birders have where you try to see as many species of birds as you can in a calendar year in a geographical area. For instance, they have big years that are all of North America. The people do big years for a particular county. And I decided that I was going to do a big year for the state of Maine. And Maine is a really big state. You go from down in Kittery all the way up into Aroostook County. It can be very urban or places where no human being has ever seen. So it's a bit challenging to do. And what I'm going to talk about is the adventure that I went through trying to see as many birds as I possibly could during the year. There is no trophy, there's no awards, there's no prize money. There's no, all that really happens is you have a bunch of birders that congratulate you and say, nice job. So how did I learn about a big year? Well, back in 2012, I was a computer software developer, and I was working late one evening. And I just to have some, let's try again. No, it's not cooperating. Just to keep some background noise, I put a movie on HBO called The Big Year. I had no idea what it was. It starred Steve Martin, Jack Black, and Owen Wilson. And it was a comedy about three men competing in a big year all across North America, trying to see as many birds as possible. I thought the whole thing was rather silly, but it was very intriguing at the same time. And I just remembered the movie and went on about my business. A few months later, I was single and I met this woman named Ingrid, who was also a birder. And trying to impress her, I took her some places where I'd seen birds and the birds had migrated, and I really made a fool of myself, but she kept dating me. And about 4 months into our relationship, she said, why don't we go to a birding festival up in Bar Harbor? And so we went there, we're out on a bird walk, and I'm still trying to figure out all these crazy birders. And we came upon this beautiful bluebird sitting up in a tree called an indigo bunting. And everybody was just so intrigued by this bird, and everybody's staring with their binoculars. 5-10 minutes go by. And I look down beneath the tree, and there's a whole herd of deer down there. And I said, oh my gosh. So I start pointing it out to birders. Look at all the deers down there. And they all look at me very pathetically, shake their head and go back to looking at the indigo bunting. And then I began to realize that birders are really crazy. A whole herd of deer a few feet away, they ignore, but this one bird up in a tree is worth standing around for a half hour on. But during that weekend on the birding festival, I began to get intrigued and I became hooked. And over the next few years, I eventually married Ingrid the next year. began to go on birding trips. We went to California, we went to Texas, we went to Louisiana, New Mexico, and anytime a rare bird would show up, we'd race out the door. And I think all of a sudden Ingrid realized that I was crazier than she was. And this is all I wanted to do was chase birds. And I had bird books everywhere, and everything I looked on the web was on birds. And finally, about 2019, I looked at her one day and I said, how would you feel about me doing a big year? A Maine big year. And she immediately said, yeah, I think you should do it. So I set about putting together a plan to see as many birds as I possibly could in the state of Maine. I got both of my knees replaced, which had completely been worn out from running when I was younger. And then on January 1st, 2021, I began the big year. So the first bird of the year was a great horned owl. And I got up before dark, before it got light, and down in Cape Elizabeth, and went over to Sprague Hall, which is a Grange Hall in a kind of a rural part of town where Ingrid and I had seen owls before. And before I could even get out of the car, I began to hear this. And that was two great horned owls singing back and forth to each other while I was in the car. And I said, okay, this is a good start to the big year. Now, for a bird to count in a big year, you either have to see it or be able to identify it by sound. You don't have to photograph it. You don't have to record it. You don't have to have any evidence, but it's all based around the good old fashioned honor system. But I made every effort I could to document every bird that I saw. And I was pretty successful in doing that. And a lot of the photos that you see, actually all the photos you see today, are ones I took during the trip. So the next real milestone bird was only a couple weeks later. You notice that the count is all of a sudden up to 107 birds. That's because at the beginning of a big year, it's real easy getting birds. You can count your blue jays, you count your chickadees, you count your robins, birds that are very, very easy to get. As the year goes on, it becomes harder and harder to find the birds. Now, big years are also done not just on land, but within the territorial limits of out in the ocean of the individual state. And I knew there were birds out in the out off the coast of Maine during the winter that no one knew about. So I talked to some lobstermen and I said, will you take me out? And they said, no, we don't think having a klutz like you on board getting tangled up in our lines is a good idea. And then Ingrid came up with the idea of going up to Port Clyde and taking the ferry that goes out to Monhegan Island every single day, taking the mail and groceries out there. Just take it out there and try to see what you can see on the ride out. And so early in the month, I think it was the 13th of January, it was an unseasonably warm day with no wind. And you can imagine going out in the ocean can be a little bit of cold. And I saw so many birds. I was sitting right up on the bow. That's a rare gull you see there. That's called an Iceland gull, a long-tailed duck, a great cormorant sitting on the post. These are all difficult birds to get during the winter. And a common murre, which I never expected to see in the winter, but this was my goal bird. This is called a dovekie, and it's very closely related to a puffin. It's about the size of a pigeon, and you almost never can see them from shore. They're very, very rare. And I'm out on this boat, and they're all around the boat. They're moving left, they're moving right. There's dozens of them. And I'm photographing one just a few feet from the boat. And birders will tell you this is remarkable. You never get this close to a dovekie. And all of a sudden, the boat captain honks the horn and says, look, Ethan, there's an eagle over here. And of course, the dovekie turns around and flies away. Now, it's always a thrill to see a bald eagle, but they're not a very uncommon bird in Maine. If you're a birder, if you look up in the air, you'll almost always see an eagle once a day. So the dovekie flew, but I'd seen it and I got some nice photographs. Moving on, end of January, the redwing. This was bird number 127 down at Capisic Park down in Portland. Now, Capisic Park is a lovely park. People walk their dogs right along the pond there. It's right smack in the middle of the city. And there had been a residential bird feeder nearby that someone had seen a black-headed grosbeak. This is a picture of one. And Ingrid and I have always seen one of these birds down in Arizona. And you certainly don't see them in Maine during the winter. So birders from all over the state were flocking to Capisic Park during the middle of January trying to see this bird. And now this is Capisic Park during the winter. It's not a very inviting place. And this was a miserably cold period at this time. It was right around 0. The wind was blowing. And I remember standing at a feeder with a couple other birders, and it's getting late in the day. And I'm going, oh, I just want to go home. And I'm saying, I'll leave after Josh leaves. I'll leave after Doug leaves. And about almost 4:15, I was just about ready to go. And somebody ran up the hill and said, there's a redwing up in a tree. Now, this is a redwing, and it looks very much like our robins, but a redwing is a bird that's generally found in London. It has no business being in North America. As a matter of fact, in January, it belongs in Iran. And so it was quite extraordinary to actually see a redwing. This is a video taken a couple days later. This redwing stayed in Capisic Park for, I think, 2 weeks. And for those 2 weeks, Capisic Park became the birding capital of North America. People from all over the country were flying in to see this. And this is a picture. This is in the height of the pandemic. Everybody's outside wearing masks, staring at this bird. And it was quite entertaining. And about a week later, I finally got the black-headed grosbeak. Now, this isn't a great photo of it, but it was sitting in a briar bush on a fence. And so that was intriguing. All right. A lot of birding is based around listening by ear. This is a red-eyed vireo. And most people that are not serious birders have never seen this bird, but it is incredibly common. But I guarantee you've heard this bird. So pretend it's middle of July. It's a hot day. It's very still. You hear this sound. A red-eyed vireo will sing 20,000 times a day. And I'm not exaggerating. That's actually the figure. They'll sit there and sing this song over and over and over again. And so this is a very common bird, but you really have to try to see it because it's hidden in the leaves of an oak tree or something, but it will sing constantly. There's another vireo that's quite common called a blue-headed vireo. And this one's even harder to find because it's located way up in the top of the trees. And you really have to have a good pair of binoculars, but generally you find it the same way by listening for the song. You can hear this sounds very much like the other one. But it's just not as fast, and they won't sing as much. The next vireo that we have quite a bit, let me see if I can get this out of the way here, is a warbling vireo. And listen to this one. No, it's not cooperating here. Yeah, all right, then. Another vireo, and this one is only found over near Fryeburg in a brownfield bog. And that's the only place I know of to find these in the state of Maine. But if you drive over there walk in a bit, and you know where to look. They're almost a sure thing. They're nesting in the trees there. It's a bird that's generally found farther south, but in this particular case, they just love brownfield bog over near Fryeburg. And this is a Philadelphia Vireo. Ingrid and I were birding in a cemetery in Cape Elizabeth, and we just happened to see these guys sitting in a tree, and we got some photographs. I'm really happy about that because it was going to be a very difficult bird to get for the year, and it just happened to show up right in front of us. And this is the last Vireo that we ever get in Maine. This is a white-eyed Vireo. Ingrid and I actually saw one of these in Texas a couple weeks ago when we were down there, but it is incredibly rare, and it showed up in a park in South Portland for about 20 minutes back in May. All right, the Big Nail Thrush. Now, if you look at this bird, it's brown, it's kind of boring looking, and it's one of the most desired birds in the state of Maine by birders. It's because it's only found above the tree line, or around 4,000 feet on top of mountains. So there's it's found in Saddleback Mountain. It's found up at the very top of Sugarloaf, and I think there's another mountain up down east that it shows up in Maine. It's winters down in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and so getting one is a bit of a challenge. So what you do is, if you're a birder, you drive to Saddleback in early June, and you hike to the top of the mountain, and you listen for it singing. And it went the wrong way. It is not a pleasant walk. It's a very steep, very rocky climb up that hill. And particularly since to get there at dawn, you generally have to leave very, very early. Interesting story. I was driving north to get to Saddleback in the middle of the night, and I got pulled over for speeding. The cop asked where I was going, and I told him I was going to Saddleback to get a bird. And he said, "Which bird is it?" And then I started the whole story about the Big Nail Thrush, and he just said, "Go. I'm not even giving you a warning, just leave." He didn't want to hear my story anymore. And believe it or not, I've been stopped 4 times for speeding on birding trips, and I've done the same thing, start talking about birds, and they always let me go. So anyways, moving along, got to right below the tree line, and this is a silhouette of the Big Nail Thrush. Not a great shot, but I heard it singing first and managed to see it. This is me up on top of the mountain doing a selfie, and this is the Appalachian Trail, which cuts across. People see big nails in the brush here quite often. And on the way down, there's this little video of a big nail singing here. Kind of cool. And late in the fall, down in, I think it was in Falmouth, I was with a bird bander that catch birds and put bands on it. And they actually caught this Big Nail Thrush, and we got real close to it, and before they put a band on it so they could track it for future use. Very, very rare to catch a Big Nail Thrush in migration. 29 species of warblers. Now, warblers are these beautiful, tiny little birds. Often they're yellow, touches of red in them, and they're bug eaters. And they rely on the bugs, mosquitoes, black flies, caterpillars that make life so wonderful here in Maine in the spring. And most of these birds winter in South America, and then in the spring, they'll migrate north. Some will stop in Maine and nest, but most of these are just passing through Maine. You see them for 3 or 4 weeks as they move to Canada, and then they're gone. Believe it or not, warblers are not very difficult birds to get. If you know where to go, They're generally within a few feet of you in a bush, in a tree, bouncing around in the ground. As a matter of fact, the first warbler of the season is this one right here. It's called a palm warbler, and I saw one this morning, which is one day earlier than I saw the first one last year. So they're beginning to move north, and thank goodness. Some of these birds, this was a yellow-throated warbler. I had to stand in front of a bird feeder for 2 days in 10-degree weather before I finally got it. It was, for some reason, was hanging around in Waldoboro on a bird feeder in January. You don't see these in Maine very often. And this is an orange crowned warbler that I also got on a bird feeder in January, this one in Falmouth. The rest of these birds were pretty easy to get. This is a morning warbler. I had to go up to Rangeley to find it on a logging road. But this bird over here, a Louisiana water thrush, is always a very challenging bird. You see, this is a bird that is supposedly not nesting in Maine, and it doesn't really migrate through here either. So you have to be very lucky to get one. But I found a spot using some reference books, etc., that they nest in. And you go over to Poland. This is a photo where Ingrid and I drove over to Poland to get this bird. And here's the GPS coordinates of where they nest. And this is an area over in Poland, very rural. Back here, there's an old mill, and you can find these huge granite blocks that were probably built by oxen. And basically you go there and we look around, and eventually we hear it singing. Believe it or not, that's what a lot of this bird chasing is looking for. You listen for the bird, and then you hope to get close enough to get a photo of it. Chuck Will's widow. This is a goat sucker. It's a bird very closely related to a whippoorwill or a common nighthawk. They're night birds, and the thing about this particular bird is it is not found in Maine. The orange area is where they spend their summers, and you can see Long Island is the farthest north. But this particular bird comes to Orland, which is up the coast quite a bit, just south of Bar Harbor, and it lands in this particular field, and you can find it after dark. So what Ingrid and I did is we had dinner in Wiscasset, and then got in the car and drove an hour and a half north till just before it's getting dark. And then we walked down this long, dark road. I think it's 2 miles in there, and it's pitch black, and the mosquitoes are brutal. But we're going in there to get this bird. And we got to the field where it's generally located, sat down on a picnic table, and it was just enough light so we could see it flying around. And then it started to sing. Oops. No. Let's try it again, see if it does. All right, well, it sings over and over again, and it seemed to follow us through the woods. So that was our romantic weekend evening away. We went up to Orland and hiked down this dark, miserable road in the middle of the night. This is a red-billed tropic bird, and this is kind of a legendary bird in the state of Maine. Back in 2005, this bird that belongs down around Cuba was seen flying around in the Gulf of Maine, and during the summer. No one had any idea why it was there. And then the following year, it landed on Matinicus Rock and stayed there for a couple summers. And then then in 2008, it landed on Seal Island, which is out beyond Vinyl Haven. And has come back there every summer since. Now, it's a really peculiar bird and this is the island that it stays on. No one has ever seen it eat anything. It disappears for days at a time. No one knows where it's going. No, we think it's a male, but there's no way to know. Actually, I think we do know it's a male because it tends to get amorous with lobster boys occasionally. And it is just a very mysterious bird. So to knowing we had to do a big year and how difficult it was going to be to get this bird, we a bunch of birders and we chartered a lobster boat. So we took to get out here to Seal Island out there. So what we did is we took the ferry from Rockland out to Vinyl Haven, and then the lobstermen took us out here to Seal Island. And we got out there. This is the crew of birders, and I'm over there eating as usual. And we got out there and we saw puffins and we saw razorbills and we saw terns and we saw different types of cormorants, all great stuff. One of the interesting things about Seal Island, the military used to bomb it for practice. And so there's still unexploded ordnance, I guess bombs, sitting in certain places of the island that you're not supposed to go. But we got out there, we were out there for hours and hours, and Troppy never showed up. And part of the reason may have been this peregrine falcon that was hanging out right by where his den actually is. And we're thinking that maybe the peregrine scared it away, or it didn't come in, or any possible reason. But a lot of people have stories. This is the second time I'd been out to Seal Island trying to find this bird with no luck. So about a month later, Ingrid and I went out on a charter of birders. And this time we went out of Stonington almost directly. And we got out there and it was hot and it was still, and we waited for hours and hours and hours. And we're going, oh boy, we're going to strike out again. We're not going to see it. And then somebody yells, there he is. And you could see flying over the island was this white bird, red bill, long streaming tail. And you could see him flying over the danger unexploded ordnance sign. And here he is flying directly over the boat. And he made pass after pass over the boat. And then he started to sing. And pretty amazing. And after a while, he landed not far away from the boat in the water and proceeded to take a bath. And you can see up in the top of the screen the researchers that are on the island. And they're so used to people coming out to see Troppy, they don't even bother looking up when we're out there. And here's one last picture of Troppy. It was really quite a thrill to see this bird. All right, so we're getting at the end of September, and birds are becoming very, very hard to come by. And I'd spent the whole morning out birding, came back late afternoon to our condo in Cape Elizabeth. And, I was pretty discouraged, hadn't seen anything. And I flipped on the TV and looked out the window, and there, sitting in a tree, was a summer tanager. Now, a summer tanager belongs on the other side of the Mississippi River. And here it was right outside the window. And I ran out in my stocking feet. It had been raining earlier. My feet were soaked, and I took a whole bunch of pictures. I immediately texted Ingrid, who teaches at Cape Elizabeth Elementary School, and she rushed right over. And I like to say, thank goodness school was out, because she would have just left some kid in charge and come over to see it, because this was quite extraordinary, having one right out there outside the window. So I spent the whole day all over the state trying to find a bird and get this really rare one just outside the window of the house. And one of the things he was doing is he was eating, actually it's a she, was eating yellow jackets, one of their favorite foods. So beginning in November, I got bird, what was it? 316, which is a golden eagle, up on top of a mountain down in York. And then I went and bothered my college roommate for the rest of the afternoon. Then a few days later, a barnacle goose showed up on a football field up in Thomaston. This one tied the state record. And this is the bird that broke the state record, an ash-throated flycatcher in a cemetery in Kittery, what is it? Biddeford Pool, excuse me. And and then this was early in November, and I just kept going. These were some tundra swans that showed up the southern part of the state. A redhead, Ingrid and I drove up to Aroostook County to get this bird. Then this is a red-headed woodpecker off Rand Pond, just outside Lewiston. This is a black-headed gull. It was out of breeding plumage and their face is white, but this was on a beach down in Cape Nettic, Long Beach. And then on December 3rd, a gray kingbird showed up on Fortune's Rock Beach down in Biddeford. And that was bird 323. And I basically didn't have another bird for 30 days. Basically the whole month of December, nothing showed up. And then this thing showed up, and you may have heard a little bit about this. It may have been in the news occasionally. Stellar Seagull, bird number 324. Stellar Seagull is a bird that belongs in Russia. It lives on the ice floes. There's probably only 4,000 of them in the world. During the winter, they sometimes migrate down to Korea, Japan, and even far south as northern China. The farthest east they were ever seen was on the western tip of Alaska. This particular bird showed up in eastern Alaska. Then it showed up in Texas, just south of San Antonio, which is, I say it's kind of like a polar bear showing up on the Rio Grande, in the Rio Grande, taking a bath. It then went up to Nova Scotia, and then it dropped down into Massachusetts. This is when I left the state. Basically during the big year, I'd made it a rule not to leave the state because some bird would show up. So I rushed down to Massachusetts to get this bird. And this was only the second time I left the state of Maine during the big year. The other time was to go to a Red Sox game. And this is about a half mile away. It was a very distant view. But look at the size of that bill. But the bird disappeared the next day and wasn't seen again. Then on December 30th, an incredible thing happened down in Five Islands, just beyond Reed State Park. A couple looked out the window of their house and they saw the Stellar Seagull sitting on a rock and then up in a tree. They were kind enough to let the birding community know about it. And about 8 of us rushed down there just before dark. And we looked and looked and looked, and no sign of it. But we had one more day left in the big year, December 31st. So I was determined to find this bird. So this is a map of the area. And right here is where the bird was seen on the 30th. The blue dot up here is where Ingrid and I live in Wiscasset. So I decided I would be really clever, that I would search Westport Island. Westport Island has tons of bald eagles on it. And I figured, okay, if this is good for bald eagles, it's good for a Stellar Seagull. So I looked all through it and I worked my way down the island, and I got down at the very tip of the island, and then my cell phone rang. And it was a high school senior that's an extremely good birder from Cumberland saying, "I've got the bird, it's right here." And he gave me the GPS coordinates, and I was only a mile away from the Stellar Seagull. but there's no roads that go back and forth here. So what I did is jumped in the car, oops, went the wrong way, and drove all the way the loop around. It was 47-minute drive. Now, I may have broken the speed limit a little bit. I picked up Ingrid on the way, and we got there, and there were hundreds and hundreds of birders from all over New England already there. And there it was, the Steller Seagull, the rarest bird ever seen in Maine, and it showed up on the last day of my big year. It just couldn't ask for better things. This is it flying over the water there, another picture of it. And after I got to 324 that day, Ingrid, who only really started doing this seriously during the summer, she ended up with 303 birds, which makes her the 7th highest scoring person ever in the state of Maine, and the 2nd highest woman ever to do it, which I think she should be really proud of herself, because she really didn't start going at it till later. But she was my wingman the whole time. She went on so many trips. So many times a bird would get sighted and she'd call me in the middle of school, I might add, and say, hey, stupid, you're in the wrong place, get going. This is a map of all the different birds that I saw in the state of Maine scattered over. This is where they were first seen. And you can see that most of them were in the southern part of the state, but we had to go up to Aroostook County several times. The farthest east bird on the whole trip was a painted bunting, and got that in Lubec. What happened is I was driving through South Portland, going south on 295, and I heard about this bird, and I got off one side of 295, got on the other side going north, and drove straight through 4.5 hours, and the bird was hanging out at a bird feeder. The farthest north was a pink-footed goose on the old limestone Loring Air Force Base in a pond up there. The farthest west was a brown thrasher on a sod field in Fryeburg, and the farthest south was a gray catbird at Fort Foster down in Kittery. If you're interested in following me, I have a blog called bigyearbirding.com, and I also have a book out that talks about the big year. If you're interested, it's in most of the local bookstores in the state, and it's also available on Amazon. And here is a compilation of every bird that I saw in the state. While that plays, if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer some.
I just want to add also that we do have Ethan's book in the library, in our library, in Patent Free Library. There's a holds list on it, but you can add yourself to the list. It's really cool. The photos are beautiful. You're seeing a lot of them right now, but it's really cool to see them in book form as well. If anyone has any questions, here's a great question. What's your next adventure?
Well, Ingrid is going to be retiring in a few years. And what we're going to do is do what's called an ABA big year, which is basically the United States and Canada. And we're not going to break the record. I'm going to come right out and say there's no chance. The people that hold the record make 8 trips to Alaska, and like Nome, Alaska, 8 trips. I think we go to Alaska once, it'll be fun, but we'll see how many birds we can get. And we might actually stop and see the world's biggest ball of yarn and stuff on the trip too. So,
what is the record?
It's 830
wow.
birds. Yeah,
that's a lot of birds.
Yeah, it is. It is.
We have another question asking, did you have a network of supporters alerting you to birds?
Constantly. The bird that I broke the record on, the ash-throated flycatcher, the Doug Hitchcock, who runs Maine, who's Maine Audubon's naturalist, who's doing a talk tonight, so we're up against each other, called me and said, hey, this bird's at the cemetery Biddeford Pool, And as I'm driving south, my phone keeps pinging from one birder after another saying, do you hear about this? Did you hear about this? Do you hear about this? So it's, yeah, you couldn't do it without communicating with other birders. Before the year began, Ingrid said, you're going to have to come out of your shell and talk to people. and so I did, and it seemed to work out pretty well. It also helped having Ingrid's much more popular than I am, so that helped a lot. So,
do you have any advice for aspiring birders or people just getting started?
Just get yourself a good pair of binoculars and just start trying to figure out what the birds you're seeing are. I mean, obviously the best thing is check out your have a bird feeder and get to know the birds that are coming to your feeders, but then go down to the river, and it's amazing the different types of gulls. And everybody gets excited around the mid-coast area when the Shaw's ospreys show back up. They're sitting there in the middle of the highway just south of Shaw's, and when they show up, and today the ones at the State of Maine at the Taste of Maine showed up. So just get to know the regular birds, and then that'll lead into more complicated birds, and you'll become a fanatic.
Any other questions anyone has, just put them in the chat. Oh, here's a good one. Do you have an opinion on people owning birds as pets?
I think it's fine. I mean, Ingrid and I put on a wedding for her daughter down at Gray Haven last summer, and they had a large cage, beautifully kept little birds, and it was really sweet to see them. I think it's fine. You just have to be careful they don't get loose. I mean, it's interesting if you go to places in certain parts of New York or Miami and stuff, there's these rare tropical birds that are nesting there because they've escaped and they've created a breeding population there, and they're actually countable in a big year in some of these cases. So, but wow. Some of these birds get loose in Maine, they're not going to do very well.
And then someone else wants to know, when in California did you see the condor?
I have never seen a condor. No, the California condor. No, I've never seen it.
Okay.
That's one of my dreams, is to see one, and we hope to see it in the big year. But they're still difficult to see. I mean, basically, it was a bird that was almost extinct, and they caught them, they've re-released them, and if you see them, they all have these big tags on their wing with big numbers on them, so they can track who the birds actually are.
Did you have any apps, or did you have a system that you used to track your sightings? It seems like you took photos, but did you do anything else?
Right. I'm a software developer, and I wrote an app that I used for myself that basically went in and compiled a list of all the birds that have been seen in the last 3 days in the state, and then assigned a ranking to them, and then plotted it on a map with directions on how to get to each of these birds. So it would make the decision on which bird I was trying to chase. So if a great cormorant showed up here, but over here you had a brown thrasher show up, it would calculate and tell me which bird made the most sense to chase. So it was pretty nerdy.
It's very thorough.
Yeah, but basically Cornell University runs something called eBird, where people, when they see a bird, they report it to, and they have all kinds of free technology out there that allows people to see where birds are reported, find out how to get there. And for instance, I talked about the palm warbler that I saw this morning over in Freeport. I put it in there, and I guarantee there were a dozen birders there this afternoon trying to see it. and they got it through eBird. So.
Do you know how many of the birds that you saw were endangered?
Oh, wow. I would have a tough time guessing, but I'm saying probably a good third of them are what are called threatened, that their populations are dropping. So many birds, their populations have dropped dramatically over the last 10 years. And there's all kinds of theories why. And then there's some birds that their populations have come back very strongly. For instance, the piping plover was, there were very, very few of them. And now if you go to any beach in the state of Maine, they're running all over the place and they've recovered very nicely. But it's taken some concentrated effort of keeping the dogs off the beaches during the summer, and keeping people walking through the dunes where the plovers nest, etc. So.
And it looks like we've got one last question here. Do you know the best spot in the lower 48 states to find birds? I'm sure you're partial to Maine, but
that's
any other?
probably quite a debate.
Yeah.
Probably either right along the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, the places where there's controversy about people coming across the border. That area has just incredible birding. And also Plum Island down in Massachusetts is spectacular, just spectacular. So, and I could probably name another dozen places that are every bit as good. But, Maine, there are a ton of really nice places, but they vary depending on the year, the time of the year. I mean, for instance, Capissic Park, where we got the red wing that I talked about earlier, that's a terrific place during spring migration when the warblers are coming through. And it's right smack in the middle of the city. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, we got another question coming in. Did you find any birds with the eye disease that was a problem in New England last year? Do you know what this person's referring to?
I'm not knowledgeable enough to know. Really not. I'm getting pretty good at identifying it, but identifying birds, but I'm not an ornithologist. I wouldn't know. So.
Any last questions that anyone wants to ask? All right, then I think we're going to wrap up. Ethan, thank you so much. That was fascinating, and your photos are beautiful. If anyone wants to view this recording again and maybe pause on your favorite bird, it'll be up on our website by the end of the week, and you can find it there. And be sure to go to our catalog and put every bird in Maine on hold for yourself. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you again to Ethan. Bye.
Thank you, folks.